Welcome back. You're still watching Power Breakfast right here on Citizen TV, and we continue with our news review this morning with Vincent Kimoso, policy analyst, and Peter Kaluma, Member of Parliament from Homa Bay County. And we want to look at what is happening at Afya House and the probe that is continuing. But before that, before the break, Bwana Kimoso, we were discussing the applause that CS Fred Matenge continues to receive, and we're talking about leadership and leadership from the top.
By the Fred, I am the Vice Chair of the Leadership Association of Kenya. And I think when we see leadership demonstrated, that's why you can see we are in our element. I want you to say that leadership is not only demonstrated in the political platform, it's also in other issues. If you remember Royal Media, Citizen to be specific, when they went into local content promotion, at initial stages, there were concerns, will it sell? And you can see currently in the entire media, there is very strong and a big time dedicated to local content. If it is not the Nigerian movies, it is the Papashindarandulas, you know, all those things. And you realize that people actually appreciate. So leadership can be demonstrated in all areas in the media. In fact, for me, I know we've been having a lot of politics, we've been having a lot of, it is good for the headlines and it sells. But in 2007, if you remember during the post-election scenario, all the media houses ran in one day, I remember a similar headline, Save Our Nation. Yes. And that communicated the message. It built the context that, hey, by the way, we will do our part. But if you political class don't put your act together, the country is bigger than. So leadership is decision making, and decisions that inspires action and transform situations, institutions, and individuals. Okay,
thank you, Bwana Kimoso. Let's now take a look at what is happening here. And the National Assembly's committee that has been probing the Ministry of Health scandal will meet on Tuesday next week to debate the alleged shielding of Afya House scandal masterminds by its chairperson and her deputy. Members of the National Assembly Health Committee accused Chairperson Rachel Nyamae and her deputy Robert Purkose of frustrating an ongoing probe by discouraging tough questions on key suspects. 20 members of that committee have reportedly signed a petition to oust Nyamae and her deputy. This report by Sylvia Chebet.
I am going to send you away, and I'm giving you the last warning.
It was meant to be a fact-finding mission. Instead, sharp divisions would emerge among the Parliamentary Health Committee members.
Doctors are not surprised. And I'm wondering, why am I here on taxpayers' cost in Mombasa, all the way from Machakos, and if I'm not able to ask questions, the questions that I think are relevant.
Committee members had traveled nearly 500 kilometers to Miritini, Mombasa County to confirm whether the controversial portable health clinic containers that cost the taxpayer $1 billion shillings were real or hot air.
We have confirmed that we have 99 40-feet high containers that have been modified to become portable clinics. That one we have ascertained the number. These containers are fair and they are of good quality.
But there wasn't consensus about this finding. Estama Investment won the $1 billion shilling tender to supply these portable clinics at a cost of 10 million shillings each, a price some members believed was highly exaggerated.
I don't think they're worth anywhere near the purported price of 10 million. Nowhere near that. In fact, I would imagine they probably just added a zero on the value.
From what you have told us, should the payment have been made at this point in time?
Yeah, the part payment can be made because the contract has three stages: supply, deliver, and install.
Honorable Mui, I would like you to just speak through this. I'll give you a chance because he was speaking. Let him speak first. But I think you need to withdraw what you say because
Nyamae's handling of the Miritini outing and her stewardship of the 5 billion shilling Afya House probe is now threatening to claim her scalp and that of her vice chair, Endebess MP Robert Pukose. At least 20 members are said to have signed a petition endorsing the leadership ouster, despite claims that Jubilee Party bigwigs are exerting pressure on the ruling coalition members to recall their signatures. The 27-member committee will need a simple majority of 14 votes to oust the duo. The infighting could seriously hamstring the committee's ability to unearth the truth in the Afya House scandal. Nandi legislator Alfred Keter has petitioned the Speaker to call for an independent forensic audit in the alleged 5 billion shilling looting. Transport CS Macharia, who headed the health docket when the bulk of the scandal unfolded, has denied his personal secretary link to one of the companies that benefited from the funds. The CS has threatened to sue the Business Daily newspaper for publishing the allegation. Sylvia Chebet, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
And it is that story that we want to discuss now with my panelists. And clearly, all our headlines: corruption probe, Afia House on the Standard, Rio probe, sports chief faced jail for stealing. Corruption is indeed big, and it's happening all over. And now we see, over the past few weeks, we've seen this parliamentary committees coming up to probe the NYS scandal. Now the Afia House, even the Rio probe is being conducted by Parliament. There's so much that Parliament has been doing, and the question has always been, what is the end game? But now we're seeing that probably some of the questions we've been raising, there could be some truth to it.
My understanding of the governance framework that we have is that the National Assembly, to be very specific, of course, as an entity of Parliament, has an oversight function over national institutions. So what they are doing is within their oversight function. But I think, in my view, the approach and the direction that they are taking at times renders some of these processes ineffective. What do I mean? For example, if we have had an issue of what is the name? The matter that we have in Afia House.
Afia House, yes.
I want actually to say here is that the person who raised this issue is an internal auditor under the administration. I think Kaluma, being in the political class, I think you guys need to commend such individuals, people who are public servants who professionally stand for the right thing. So I think first, that he deserves actually to be, because they can easily be targeted, and you know the things that have happened with that for me is the first thing, that to affirm the place of such people. And number two is the approach. If for example there is an issue, I think at times, as much as we have members of Parliament who, with all due respect, they are experts in different areas, but the technical engagement and the process, Parliament can call for a forensic audit, so that the process that they undertake and they go is actually informed by a technical report, so that Parliament is facilitated to play its oversight role more effectively, so that when they even make recommendations, they are not general recommendations, they are specific recommendations. For example, you remember there were the information was on public circulations that there were already pressures to have this internal auditor transferred because they are from Treasury. I think for me, we need to speak to the entire internal audit process. It tells me if you improve internal audit in ministries and people do their professional work, we institutionalize performance. So why we are saying tomorrow it's NYS, and you remember it was done by the Department of the Criminal, and they handed over the reports to the cabinet secretary. So that process in itself, there were also questions of conflict of interest. So I think for me, my recommendation to Parliament is that as they perform their oversight role, particularly on this issue, let them strengthen the process, so that we don't go round circles doing, because tomorrow morning another thing may come out from another. Will we have this kind of approach, or will we professionalize the process?
Bwana Kaluma, you are in the National Assembly, and I know you sit in one or two committees, and now this is an accusation of that someone is actually trying to influence the outcome of whatever probe they are conducting. And the questions that we've been asking over the past few weeks is, are in these exercises, by these probes they're conducting, exercises in futility? Like this one, for example, the committee is not even in agreement. The way they're conducting their probe under a tree and questioning, the chair lady says this, the other person disagrees. Surely, is this not an exercise in futility?
Fred, under our new constitution, there is no institution more powerful than Parliament. Remember, I've said here before that in as much as we can talk about corruption in ministries, you know, the role of the presidency in abetting or allowing it to go ahead, the surrender by the president, really the House of Parliament, the two houses of Parliament, have to take the lion's share. The people of Kenya gave us the power to budget because we are the representatives of the people. And then the people of Kenya gave us the power to oversight the budget, to check that the money we have committed to the various sectors and functions in service of our republic are properly utilized, prudently applied. And then the people have given us the power, if you look at Article 95, Sub-Article 5, to review the conduct in office of the President, the Deputy President, and all state officers, and initiate the process of removing them from office. I mean, how much more power do you need to have to ensure that there is service delivery? What we have here, Banakimosop, is bigger than, you know, the squabble you are seeing.
Tell us more.
You need to be asking yourself the question, particularly in regard to the Afia House, you know, scandal. What does the national government deal with in the health sector? Remember, health is over 95% devolved. The national government remains with policy and what we call national referral health facilities. And by the way, in terms of national referral health facilities, you can count them on the fingers of one hand. I don't think they go beyond 5. Kenyatta National Hospital is more teaching and referral hospital, and a few, 2 or 3,
Madari.
You know, others, Madari, and just a few of them. Now, the question you should be asking first is, in terms of our budgeting as Parliament, particularly in the National Assembly, how did we avail our all 10 billion to be applied by the Ministry of Health to do these things we are calling mobile clinics, which are actually stationary containers? Are those mobile clinics Kenyatta or Moi teaching Omadari? You know, fundamental question. Because before the minister comes and tells you I was spending money anyway, the health committee ought during budgeting to have asked the minister, because the budget, you know, requests usually come from the ministry, then they are processed in Parliament. I mean, what questions did the health ministry raise concerning that budgetary, you know, line? Then after that, you go to the next level. If you have something like that goods container, I mean, let us be honest. This goods container, people even use them to run kiosks around here. Yeah, these containers carried on lorries. Based on the footage, their pricing will range from 100,000 to 400,000. How can it be a mobile clinic? How can you tell us that such a container is 10 million shillings? It is looting. It's very sad you see people watching, and what you see happening is happening. Number 2, how are the payments processed? And you've seen the gentleman's stammer when Yikal was asking, ought you have been paid before? When do you avail the facility of letters of credit?
But Barakaluma, I think we're in agreement.
Let me go
actually, no, we're in agreement that actually a crime was committed. Money could have been misappropriated. Fine. We do understand that, and that's why the probe, that's why we're having the probe. But it's the manner how in which your colleagues are handling this matter. The kind of
they're
trust,
not injecting
the kind
confidence,
of trust, the kind of trust bestowed on Parliament. You say you have a lot of power. The kind of trust bestowed on you to probe such matters. Yet now we are seeing that someone clearly, for some reason, is trying to cover up. And the claim is that some of these processes, some of these committee grillings that are conducted by the committee are being used to sanitize people who are actually
Fred, let me answer, you know, that question, because that's where I was going. We, beyond the powers that I've narrated are given to Parliament, we are a presidential system. What does a presidential system mean? That Parliament works as a unit. Actually, there is no opposition in Parliament. We oversight the government, whether we are on what we call the government side, the majority side, or the minority side. There is no opposition. The problem we have in the structuring or the thinking of our current members of Parliament, particularly on the Jubilee side, is that their first and foremost duty is to protect government. And of course, you saw it when we were, you know, electing, you know, the leadership of all these committees. You would note that, save for Public Accounts Committee and Public Investment Committees, which are by law to be led by what essentially should be the opposition, the minority side, all the other committees, the chair and the vice chair from the Jubilee side. So the problem you see with the health chair is the thinking that this is something to cover up Jubilee. Okay? And by the way, let me say that in terms of the leadership in Parliament, if they do not deal with the leadership of this committee, I mean, you've seen that conduct when you are in a field visit in public and you are talking to colleagues as if you are better elected than others. If they do not deal with the chair and you know, the vice chair in terms of how this budget was proposed, in terms of oversighting how this money was used or whether it ought not to have been used. Remember, before we have removed a whole membership of the committee. We will remove them. But it will not be just health committee. It will go to budget committee. We will remove them.
Kaluma, the genesis of the problem, I think the genesis of the problem, Kaluma, was in the last parliament. When they passed their standing orders, even the way the election of the chair and the vice chair, that was where the problem began. And I think for me, it is good to see Parliament do their oversight function. But also one of the questions we need to ask is that how do we watch the watchman? Because the Article 10.2 of the Constitution, or national principles or values of accountability, the 17 values, one of the institutions that is meant to be held into account is also the institution of Parliament.
Yes.
You oversight other people, but what happens when we have...
and in the same vein, in the same vein, because now we are seeing that the fight against corruption, even within Parliament, is a party affair. That when it's a ministry, government ministry involved, it's the Jubilee side, as Kaluma said, that's trying to protect the government.
Let me add
what is happening in Kilifi? What is happening in Kilifi, for example, involving an ODM governor? We are seeing now the Jubilee members saying now that governor should take responsibility.
Is it involving the ODM governor or the county government?
It's the county government headed by an ODM governor.
Allow me to
but we're not seeing ODM members calling for the governor to take responsibility as well.
I imagine action has been taken.
Allow me
or
to
why should the governor come in? Fred, the biggest weakness of Kaluma is consistency.
I love this.
I've always said here that even the idea that governors are being called to the Senate should not arise. If you have corruption in a sector of the county government, and that is a government, deal with the head of that sector, deal with the person in charge of expenditure. And this is why we've been saying that if there is corruption in ministries, don't go calling the president to come. I think I've been very consistent on that. I would be the first person, if I knew the governor's hand, and by the way, Emerson King, you were with him in college, the same time, was 1 year ahead of me. If I had evidence that Kingi's hand was in the tail, the people of Kenya can be sure about my consistency.
But you have to wait for evidence.
First, certainly not. But I need, something believable. That is how I usually proceed. Now, in terms of, our weaknesses in Parliament, I want to blame the media. I want to blame, citizens, good citizens like Kimosop. I came here when we entered Parliament. When the media started spiraling this thing called tyranny of numbers, Jubilee has tyranny of numbers, let people move on. And I said, really, you are injecting into the mind of the Jubilee side in Parliament that theirs is to defend the government. And by the way, in their wrong thinking, when they defend government on corruption matters, they think they are protecting government. They are doing worse to the government. If they assisted in oversighting corruption, the government would be cleaner than it is. Because Jubilee is actually going to fall on this corruption thing. So I think the media should, dissipate or attenuate this thing called tyranny of numbers. People like Kimosop should allow those Jubilee MPs to begin thinking and remembering we are members of Parliament together.
Kaluma, I am actually happy with what you're pointing out, that our legislators, some of them have not appreciated that they are, Kaluma, for example, you can say openly when you hear that we are in the opposition, that parliamentary approach, like in the UK, of this side and this other side, in our setup is that the legislature is an independent arm of government performing the four functions: oversight, legislation, representation, and the budget making. Now, parliamentarians ought not to see themselves as Jubilee or ODM. They are legislators, and they will be benchmarked. Of course, politically, it's expedient to tell them from the executive side that you are ODM, you are CORD. It's politically expedient. But in terms of the question I'm asking is that overall, one of the things I want us one of these days to come have a conversation on Parliament as an institution, on its delivery as required under the Constitution, because we're there, we will now evaluate Parliament irrespective of their affiliation. Then we will ask, for example, in the last Parliament, your budgetary allocation was, I think, over 15 billion. What have you done with this 15 billion? How many laws have you passed? What quality of laws? How many that for me is the question we need to ask.
On that, Fred, on that, don't go that direction. In terms of legislation, I tell you, the current Parliament has done very well. In fact, we plunged into areas no Parliament as of yesterday, we were...
But in terms of oversight,
we were debating.
miserable.
In terms of oversight, I can tell you there is nothing more painful being a member of parliament in the CORD coalition in the current parliament. Because when it comes to budgeting and oversight, you know, these Jubilee MPs are called to State House, and when they come from there, they say there is no debate, put the question, we vote, we walk out. And before you say anything about the budget, I can tell you, Fred, they have said, they are going to take tea. Sometimes there are very painful things. This man is being availed to help. You remember the last year's, supplementary budget. I was making noise saying, how do you remove money meant for HIV/AIDS supplement and take it to something you're calling, cancer excellence center without saying what it is going to do there? These are the money is now being eaten. If you remember when we were grilling, NYS, I was asking the question to the former CS. How did you just go determining by yourself that you need 3.5 billion from Treasury? And Treasury just gives it casually. And it is the money that is then...
And with this problem and the tyranny of numbers in Parliament, now, Kaluma, do you think this committees will serve any purpose in terms of probing this very many corruption allegations?
What they do is that with the difficulties we've had, of course, as Parliament, we must also be, congratulated where we've done, a bit. You remember we disbanded, or we removed several members of Parliamentary Accounts Committee before, when it was necessary that we remove them.
Because of party indiscipline?
Not party indiscipline. There were issues of, corrupt practices and integrity from, parliamentary engagements abroad and within. And then you remember we disbanded the entire, budget committee only a short while ago. This is another question you would be raising about the integrity of the leadership of the budget committee, because how did you pass this money meant for devolution to the national government to steal? But you remember we disbanded them. Now, where we have a weakness is that we will agree as Parliament to disband even a committee. But what happened in the budget committee after we disbanded them? As CORD, we said we are returning. In fact, none should be returned. And we had a Kamkunjias as all members of Parliament to say these members of the budget committee, there are issues of integrity arising in their conduct, in the manner they are availing money to be stolen. We said all members. On the side of CORD, we said that is it. And by the way, we excluded all our membership then. What did the Jubilee do? They come with the entire list of their members, including the chair. And they say it is tyranny of numbers, and it is passed on the floor there. What do you do? I'm saying, the challenge we have.
Allow me point of information, since you're parliamentarian, and this is allowed. I think for me, Kaluma, you are a resource person. I have always appreciated Kaluma, the lawyer, and the learned. Nothing stops Kaluma in terms of when you have, for example, recommending, when you have parliamentary induction, in terms of when you even retreat, nothing stops you guys from actually during your engagement and the induction processes to have debates on this, on what exactly does it mean to be a legislator. Because the challenge is, if we have the divides, which of course they will always be there because people will be elected on political lines, but that yes, when you're sworn in as a member of Parliament, your fiduciary responsibility is to the institution of Parliament as a legislator that has the four functions, so that when we are even looking at accountability issues, we don't have the scenarios that we are seeing, whereby you can see clearly from the way the questions are being asked, it is fast, take care of the image of government. The focus should be, these are public resources. The Kenyans are paying taxes. Did we have value for our money? Did we get the right thing?
Bwana Kaluma, you must agree that does not exist in Parliament.
I think those are the questions that we have a responsibility to raise.
Anyway, in a short while we need to take another break so that when we come back, because of time, we discuss this headline on page 3 of the Daily Nation: Pasaris vows to sue abusive Miguna. But briefly, you can just respond to that before we take that break.
Yeah, Fred, let me tell you straight that our problem, and all Kenyans know, is this thing you call tyranny of numbers and failure of foresight on the part of the Jubilee side to realize that we are working as a unit, as members of Parliament. If we were, and it is not about induction. By the way, Parliament does very well. We caucus, we talk together, we do everything together until an issue that Jubilee, from the head of state coming downwards, believe in. You remember even the budget for this year, we were not to pass it for our own reasons. I mean, then the day we've said we are going to actualize this decision, in a Kamkunji by members of parliament. The Jubilee members are called to some hotel, and they are told you are going that direction, and when they come, an order has been, a waiver has been applied.
Clearly there's a problem in the National Assembly.
But we are doing well.
You're doing well. That's, that's debatable. Anyway, let's take this break, then we'll come back. Willis is on the other side of the studio to continue with this Somali culture.